All right, my fellow beautifully, gently used humans, let's talk about reinvention. Not the kind where you change your hairstyle and call it a day. I am talking about the full-blown, unapologetic kind of reinvention tour that shakes up your entire life. And who better to guide us through it than Tamsen Fadal? You might know her as the Emmy-winning journalist, author, advocate for midlife empowerment, but most importantly, she has proved that life doesn't end at 40 or 50 or beyond, it only expands. Tamsen and I dive into everything from navigating big life pivots, busting outdated timelines, and why menopause is not the end of the road. Plus, we might just settle once and for all why New Yorkers' hair always looks better. If you've ever found yourself in your life going, okay, I've gotten to this point, now what? This episode is for you. Let's get into it. This is The Gently Used Human with Tamsen Fadal. Tamsen, welcome to The Gently Used Human. What a pleasure to have you.
Oh, I'm so excited to be here. Thank you.
My pleasure. And I love how you've really become like America's best friend. Like that's really how I see you, of like everyone leaning into your social media, your YouTube channel, and just getting so much support and camaraderie and connection from you. And I can understand why. Like even connecting with you now, I'm like, are you my best friend?
I'll be your best friend.
Okay, fun. We have the New York hair situation in common, which is we do. We just find that in New York, your hair just sits better.
It does better. And here's what somebody told me.
Yeah.
Because no one believed me. Somebody said there's the water in I'm going to make sure I get it right. I think the water in New York is hard.
Yeah,
and
it is.
Water here is soft. And that's the reason why. And I'm like, that doesn't make any sense at all. Like, not at all. I'm going around like, can someone help me? So I just want you to know, I got my hair curled for you yesterday. And
it looks great.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
I would have thought you were in New York by the way that your hair is full, voluminous, curling.
Thank you.
The woes we have to navigate, especially in middle age.
A good start.
I'm so excited to talk to you about new beginnings and milestones, like developmental milestones of our lives, because so many of us who are listening right now can really relate to the fact that like we reach certain milestones in life and we go, wait, is this where I'm supposed to be? And wait, what the fuck is happening? What's happening to my body? What's happening to my mind? What's happening to my social groups? And more so, it's like there's a lot of endings and beginnings that fluctuate through that timeline.
Oh, so true. It's so true. I don't know about you, but I came up on the phrase, but maybe it was 5 years ago. And I kept hearing myself say, now what? Like, now what am I supposed to be doing? Am I where I'm supposed to be? Is this it? Yeah. Is there more? And I just remember that playing over and over in my head. And I would say it to people and they were like, it sounds negative. And I said, it's not negative. It's just that I keep wondering if there's something else, right?
Yeah.
Because I think we grew up thinking you're gonna go through this area, you're gonna hit 50, it's gonna be terrible because you're 50 years old and this is the big 50 that you've been dreading, and then you're going to retire and then you're gonna die. And it doesn't seem like that, right? But that's what I remember growing up thinking was the path.
And what have you identified that's different than that sort of early understanding of what's going to happen post 30, post 40, post 50? Yeah.
Oh gosh, so much. Look, I got remarried at the age of 50. I mean, that was incredible to somebody that, I get excited to walk the world with, and I think I found a new desire for what I love to do every day. There's something that makes me bounce out of bed every day. And it's working toward improving women's health and wellness and these kind of timelines. And I also realized there aren't any timelines. And that was probably the most staggering thing to me. So I get excited looking at people that are in their 60s, 70s, 80s, and seeing them with just absolute desire and passion and purpose, and knowing that there's that whole runway ahead that I didn't really know existed growing up.
I think there's this misconception that we have this initial or clear passion. I mean, like going to college at 18 as though we know what we want to do for the rest of our life. I mean, I can relate most to Madonna. And in the sense that like the constant reinvention tour, like I know that you're in the same boat. Like, yeah.
What was going on?
I mean, she's also your neighbor in some locations.
Yes.
And, but it's that idea of like every few years there's this reinvention. And I always really felt like, that's who I look up to, because every few years I'm like, I think I need a new degree. I think I need a new career. I want to start a new company. And you've done so many things. You really have. Do you relate to Madonna in that way?
Gosh, I mean, I'm an 80s girl, right? So I absolutely relate to her. And she had fabulous hair.
Fabulous. New York hair.
New York hair. I do agree with you. I agree. There are so many things I want to do. And every few years I look up and I'm like, oh, I've learned a lot in a very short amount of time. I think we used to say something like, oh, every 5 years you change, every 10 years you become this new person. I mean, I think that amount of time is getting a lot shorter for sure. I think that, where I want to spend my time has definitely changed. I think I don't take taking care of myself as a luxury anymore. Like, I actually think it's really, really important. And as I'm getting older, I want to make sure that whatever that, that timeline looks like, it's real, they're precious ones, where I feel good about myself and I feel good about the people that are around me. I think friendship circles change, which is not always easy. I'm looking at my 85-year-old father who just started a pottery class, and he's like, yeah, he's amazing. And he took a class for bonsai trees to learn how to create, to like do the art on the bonsai trees. And I just went, he's 85. Like I was like, I just want to sleep some days. So I'm really excited about that. And I agree with you. Like there's so many things I want to do. I went back to school and got a degree as a health coach and wellness coach, just because I wanted to learn, more about those things, not just about food and nutrition, but just like overall health. So I'm with you on that. And I think if we can tell people that that's okay, they don't have to ask permission to do it, and that age should never be a deterrent for anything, that's when we move ahead.
As you're talking about, and we're talking about this like reinvention tour, we actually do that physiologically. Like our bones, we have a new set of skeletal bones every 7 years. They don't get replaced from the outside in. They literally regenerate, and we shed new cells until we regenerate a whole new set of bones every 7 years.
Isn't that amazing?
That's so cool.
I'm always fascinated. I mean, I can imagine what you have learned in the course of a lifetime. There's so much more that I still need to learn. I was a journalist, and so I followed a lot of stories and stuff, and a lot were in local communities, but I'm not doing that anymore. I stepped away from a job that I thought I was going to do forever, honestly. Like, I had no idea that I was not going to do that job forever. I thought, if I'm lucky enough to be able to do this job forever, I'm staying right here. And then I found a story that was just a different type of story that I wanted to tell. And it was not an easy decision, but I just do feel like there's so much more for me to learn now that I've stepped away from that. And so I can't absorb enough, I'm like the set of bones.
I love that. Like, looking back on your career as a journalist, what would be maybe one of the major stories that impacted you the most?
I was always impacted by the people stories, obviously, because people would open up their homes and then tell you the most intimate things, whether it was that a family member had been killed or died, or a tragedy. We would go into the worst situations, right, and try to help those people in those stories. So I always, I was touched by a lot of those different stories. I think the biggest one for me was going to Afghanistan during the war was probably the most pivotal in terms of really seeing the world in a different way, and something I'd never experienced before, and being in a country I'd never experienced before, and meeting women that were just terrified to be out in public. And, it was a very different time. And so I think that really changed a lot. I remember coming back into the US when we flew back with the Air Force and thinking like, oh my gosh, we have all these big buildings here and all these people. It was just a very different, it turned my head quite a bit. Obviously it goes without saying 9/11. And, COVID really was the last real big story that I covered. And that was one that I personally experienced. And so that really changed my perspective of how important news is, like real news, not necessarily editorial news, but real news to get people information. I think that made me feel, at the end of that job as a journalist, really proud, of how we helped all journalists, all people, all first responders help the world move forward.
Mm. Can you say more about like how it impacted you and being in it and covering it? Because that's,
Yeah. Yeah, because that
oof.
was the first time I'd ever lived a story, right? You
Yeah.
would show up to something and it was somebody else's story to tell. I think
Yeah.
that one, because none of us knew what was going on, and I think in the world of news, you always assume that the journalist, we've done our homework, we kind of know what's happening, and if it's something happening live, you just kind of go through it with people. But this is one we were experiencing at the same time at home. So remember, we were bringing groceries in, we were spraying groceries. I was walking to the studio every day because there was nobody on the streets of New York. I mean, I don't know where you were during that, but New York was desolate. And to walk through Times Square, with my clothes to go do the news, not knowing, not being able to be around my coworkers in a studio, everybody masked up, was just my head was bizarre because we never really took off during that time. We did a work from home in terms of had a studio and we would swap back and forth, but we never were not working. We couldn't just work from home the whole time. So yeah, it really made me appreciate the job. And then it also made me appreciate what I didn't know about work and life. As a journalist, I worked mornings or I worked evenings. So I was never really part of the real world for like 30 years. And so I always just I just lived in a different world than I felt like most people did that weren't in a career that was like, doctors probably do the same thing, these kind of shifts that are so odd. Yeah. So that was the first time I had access to that. And then I just felt very vulnerable. So I'd be on the air trying to be authoritative and confident and then feeling very vulnerable at the same time, which was not an emotion that I had ever experienced before in the news world. Not at any time.
Wow. I can only imagine kind of the bind there of having to be confident and kind of give people a sense of support. And I don't know if hope is even the right word in that context, but certainly support. And then still be going through your own process and navigating the fear, because I got stuck in Australia actually during COVID.
Oh, wow.
And I couldn't get home, but I was on calls constantly with folks in New York, and the fear and the terror, terrifyingly, a lot of suicidal ideation and just despair. And so like, I really saw, I wasn't part of it, but I could witness it and had space, which was a different experience. That's like you were talking about, perhaps being in Afghanistan, being the witness versus being in New York during COVID and being in it and having to report it and being a witness.
It is. And I can imagine like being there and watching what's happening and trying to understand and help at the same time. I was in Nicaragua right before everything shut down in New York. And so I remember being there, and I was with UNICEF at the time, and we were traveling around doing stories about women, health, women, mothers to be, and providing aid. And I remember we went to a school, and the teacher said, I hope you're not bringing that COVID here. And I was like, what? No, what? I had no idea, because this was like early, maybe mid-February, early-ish February that we were there, and we came back home. And I remember sitting in the airport in Dubai, and I was watching like things shutting down all around us and people with masks. And I went, what is going on? And so, then we came back and we realized what was happening. So it was watching it from different parts of the world, I think, is a different point of view, obviously. And I also think that what it did let me do is see all these different roles that people play in the world too. And I don't think, like, I knew it, but I didn't know it. Like, the fact that we need everybody for the world to go round was really driven home for me, from healthcare workers to first responders to journalists to, people that are dealing with, all the different jobs that just kind of everything was grind to a halt, And so I think that it showed me how important all of us are in this ecosystem.
To also, I want to pull back one of the things you said of like going to Afghanistan. I mean, you were in the trenches of the human experience as a journalist. I may or may not have watched you a lot in the years. No, I have seen your
as long segments. As you're here now.
I have seen you. I have seen segments of you prior to even this. And, there's this aspect in trauma work that it's like there's one thing to be a part of the experience, to be directly impacted, to experience the pain, the abuse, the cultural, the governmental punishments, things like that. And it's another thing to be witness. There's a whole nother sort of genre of trauma of like being in proxy and witnessing, but also having space. And I'm curious your own personal experience of having kind of witnessed so many things that are so deeply impactful, and how you navigated that.
Yeah, I love that question. I've never been asked that question before. I think that that's where I understood the difference of being involved in something where, where COVID was, and walking by the hospitals every day and knowing that the death toll piling up, and knowing we were all part of that, versus something like, watching it from the outside, a little bit from the outside. But I don't think you could be a good storyteller or journalist without taking some of that on and taking some of that in. If you go to a mother's house, and a mother's just lost their teenager, or partner has just lost another partner, or there's been something devastating, when you're involved in that, you can't go into that kind of situation just like, okay, tell us what happened. You do have to have some feeling and emotion and understanding beyond what you think you have to have for somebody, first of all, to open up to you, and second, to just feel like you could even ask a question in a time like that. So I think that as bold and brave as you put on a face, I do think that impacts you outside of there. So how it impacted me all the time was, and still does, is I would take what happened there and be panicked that something like that would happen within my own circle, right? So I'd be at a car accident, and then for the next 6 months be worried about every member of my family and be calling people like crazy person. And my family would be like, why are you calling? What's going on? So I do think that a lot of fear of loss comes with that, and a lot of almost too much awareness sometimes of the very worst. So when I jump to the worst case scenario, I definitely know why I do that. I do it because I've seen the worst case scenario in most situations, and I couldn't understand it for a very long time. And maybe I'm processing it as I talk to you, but I do think that's probably why I do that, because I've seen it go to that end. And so I'm very aware of, it doesn't take very many steps. It can get there very quickly. And I've seen things that I, had to go, okay, and shut that off, because if not, I think you would, and I can't even imagine what doctors and healthcare professionals and nurses and people that work in those fields, see well beyond what I've seen. But yeah, I think you have to definitely separate that, because if not, it just continues to, impact every part of your personal life.
Yeah. I think that there's this kind of balancing act between having to what's called auto-regulate, which is like put it on a shelf.
Yeah.
Like, not right now. But the trick of auto-regulation is to bring it back eventually and process it, or it kind of becomes that thing where it's like, we imagine the worst, we start catastrophizing, we imagine how this will impact the people we love. And as you're saying, because it does, I remember a good friend of mine, he wrote, did you read I assume you read The Body Keeps a Score?
Yeah.
So Bessel was saying how it took him years to really get to the point where and it was part of a psychedelic process of realizing how much he had taken in as a trauma therapist.
Yeah.
That he had been like, this is my job.
Yes.
And done some, I got this.
Yeah.
And then the reality is it's got me. Yeah. It's got me more than I could have imagined.
I have a doctor that, he passed away about a year ago, but he was a doctor that he took on people. He was a hands-on all the time. He went from being a very Western medicine surgeon into more of a homeopathic approach, but very hands-on with everything. And he died of a very aggressive form of cancer. And I always wonder if him touching people, feeling people, like feeling their trauma, brought a lot into himself somehow. I've always wondered that. I don't know that if there's anything to it, but I've always wondered that about that situation. And I agree with you. I can see that happen over and over. And I do believe that the body does that. Without question. I have noticed a difference in the last 14 months, because I did step away I notice that the stories that I'm telling daily are changing, and while they come with their share of rawness, and there's many parts of them that are difficult to hear, and people share things that your heart just bleeds. I don't have that overarching panic all the time, which I've noticed that's gone away a little bit, which is interesting.
Tamsen, that's a big deal.
Yeah, it is a big deal.
That's significant.
It is. I said to somebody the other day, like, I love waking up every day and popping out of bed. It's like so exciting. And they were like, have you never felt that? And I go, well, I mean, I always loved the career. I did always love. And I still do, because I think storytelling is everything. It's the only way we learn. Yeah. I never realized it, because you don't realize something like that when you're going through it every day. Right.
No.
So it's pretty incredible.
Yeah. I mean, I think about that. Thank you for naming that, because I think a lot of us might go, ooh, I feel like I have a little pep in my step, but I still feel dragged down. And we might not recognize that it's coming from the things we're witnessing.
Yes.
And I'm going to say something that might be a little controversial between you and I, because I know you're a journalist, but there isn't an impact of watching the news.
Oh, sure. Oh, I agree with that.
Yeah. And there's an impact of watching some crazy ass shit on television. And there's some, and watching people fight on the street. I mean, we're both New Yorkers at heart. So we've seen some shit, y'all. Yeah. Like, you don't walk on the streets of New York or go through the subways without seeing some wild stuff.
It's so funny you say that. I was walking outside my building about a month ago, and two guys were arguing. And then all of a sudden they literally started punching each other. And I walked across the street, and I'm like, maybe I should call 911. Like and then I went, what's wrong with you? Like, why didn't you go pull them apart? And then I thought I was going to get punched if I did, but you're right. You see some stuff. That's just going to get coffee.
That's a morning coffee routine in New York City, y'all. It's true. And I think that we don't typically go, unless it happened directly to us, we don't typically go, should I pause? Should I feel into that? Should I process that? Should I kind of go for a run or metabolize the way that impacted me?
Yeah. No, you're so right.
I have this rule that, if I'm going to listen to like the daily or watch a news segment, I always go, I have a time limit. I have a time limit based on how my body responds. The moment I feel saturated, like, okay, that's all I can do, I go for a run. That's
great. That's a great rule, though, because I don't know that most people have that. And or awareness of the impact. I mean, I certainly didn't. I didn't have awareness of the impact until I wasn't in it on a day-to-day basis.
Exactly. Because when it becomes our norm, we don't know anything different.
There's nothing different. And people would say, like, how do you do that? How do you have dinner after you do something like, I'm like, I don't know. I don't understand the question. Like that, literally, I did not understand the question.
Yeah. It's so hard to see, to know what we don't know, because it's like our status quo. And it kind of relies on us going, hey, y'all, the next time you watch the news, just notice what's happening with your breath. Notice what your muscles are doing. Are they tense? Are they relaxed? Next time you watch a fight on the street in New York City, take a moment before you eat that first bite of bagel and go, what am I feeling besides hunger?
Yeah, right. Right. And order decaf at that point. You're so right about that. It's very funny that it took me such a long time, I think, to understand, but I think it takes all of us a long time when that is the norm. There's no question about that. And those are years I would never give back. I really enjoyed that. There were so many amazing parts too, and so many amazing people that defeated all odds. And I think that's where I noticed that feeling in the other direction, when I've met somebody that has defied odds or doesn't even know how amazing they are. Like, I really like the extraordinary, ordinary stories, because I think that those teach me a lot. I lost my mom at an early age, and I think that I didn't ever have a roadmap past the age of 51, which is when I lost her. So I do gravitate towards some of those people that have those kind of stories to tell, to see how amazing life can be, and not on a timeline. And so that part's exciting. So so there were a lot of amazing stories too during that time, as in between so many others that that impacted the world.
Yeah. Thank you for naming that, because I didn't want to seem dogmatic
Oh,
about the
no,
news, but
no.
it is. There's hope contagion out there, and that's
Yeah.
also so important. And
Yeah.
the stories we see and the stories we participate in can really, there's a research in positive psychology that it's something like when you are zestful, for example, when you are in jumping out of bed every morning in excitement of what you do has a contagious effect to 135 people.
Oh, wow.
I mean,
really?
you have 5 million people following you, so it's a little bit more. But
wait,
in general,
true?
just walking down the street and that interaction through your day has an average contagion of touching 135 people.
Is that saying hi to them? Is that just like brushing past them? Is that just your energy that they feel and they don't even know?
It's a combination. It's like, because even within saying hi or connecting, or you're more likely to make eye contact with someone or give a little smile. So it's not so easy to distinguish as to what is the exact factor, but it's this general overall, like the way you exude, the way you are in life in that way has this beautiful contagious response.
That's awesome. I had no idea. It's funny. My husband is like a very happy person. And and I'm like, what? And so somebody said like, oh, he's always smiling. He's always smiling. And I go, yeah, it's like unicorns in the morning. Like he's, he'll wake up and be like, here's your coffee. And I'm like, wow, God, we gotta do this again. So I do find like everyone loves to be around him. And so they'll meet me and then they'll meet him and they'll be like, when is Ira coming back? Is he going to be here? And I go, what about me? So he must have that contagion. I don't know if I have it.
It's a very unique, special quality.
It's really funny. I was like, he must be more contagious than me, I'm thinking.
Well, and don't forget that is contagious onto you.
Okay, that's good. I'm going to go hang out some more.
I think that's why you married him, my love.
I think so. He's so happy. I'm like, do you ever stop laughing? What? Everything's not so funny. Because remember, I came from the news world. So I'd come home after the 11 o'clock, I'd be like, what? Nothing's so funny. How was your day? Awful.
I think that's do you think that's part of producing some fun shows and stuff like that?
I guess so. I mean, his days are fun, I think, he has a fun job. I mean, I think he does. I'm sure I know there's stresses with it, but it's not like he's not producing the evening news, he's producing game shows and, those are talk shows. Those are fun things. So maybe it has something to do with that. That's actually a really good point. Oh, now I understand.
We're discovering a lot on this episode about
just like a happy person. We're covering a lot in this session.
There are a lot of factors So I want to also get to, as we talked about, milestones, developmental milestones, because that's a big part of what you are doing now. But before we get to the milestone that you're focusing on, I want to kind of talk about the milestones we have in our life. We'll go back. I mean, the first one that comes to my mind for some reason is puberty.
Oh, yeah.
But there are a lot of major milestones that are projected onto us. This is what should happen by the age of 25. You should be married and have kids and blah, 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 blah. And then there's kind of the milestones that we create.
Yeah. Yep.
So, and there are biological milestones that we cannot avoid.
Of course.
Like puberty. How was your puberty? When was the last time someone asked you that?
No one's asked me that in a long. I don't know if anyone ever asked me that.
I don't think I've ever asked anyone that.
I'm happy I'm here first. I think it was good. I definitely know that I developed before other girls did, and so actually I started to, and then I think I stopped. Everything was all about your boobs, yeah. That's for girls. And so I do remember that I was like, I need a bra. And I was only, I don't even know how old I was. So my parents were humoring me. And I remember they got me this yellow bathing suit top. And they were like, here it is. I'm like, thank you. So I wore it under everything. So my kid pictures, everything's like this, because I've got a tank top bathing suit on under every outfit because I thought I was a grown up. And then I remember in high school stuffing my bra. And so they called me Puffs for like puffs and necks.
Oh.
I know. So that was my puberty. I had a lot of breakouts all the time and braces. So that was I had some rough pictures. I said to my dad, like, I look like Chewbacca. My hair is like, what's going on? Like, what did you guys look at me before I left the house? Like, I don't understand this. It's like really cruel. So yeah, I've gotten rid of most of those pictures. Every once in a while, my brother will send it to me, like in the middle of the day, a traumatizing, awful looking picture.
Yeah.
What about you? How was yours?
No one's ever asked me either. So thanks for asking me. Thanks for being my
You're welcome.
first.
It's contagious.
It is contagious. I recently was hanging out with my niece and my nephew who are both kind of going through puberty. And I just remember going, and you looking at it and you're like, oh shit, was it that bad?
Yeah.
And I think it was.
It was.
But you just like, you go through life and you experience so many other adulting shitty moments that you're like, puberty, please. But I remember in puberty trying to shave, but I didn't have any hair to shave. And like wanting to be more mature.
Yeah.
I remember going to school and telling my friends, I don't know what grade it was, maybe 5th or 6th grade, and being like, I think I have my first pubic hair. And it was like a single pubic budding hair, and being so excited and proud and like going, I'm something because this is happening.
I'm manly.
I'm manly. And
so funny.
Definitely the acne was so bad. And I was, a childhood
Clearasil dots everywhere, all over my face. Clearasil.
Yes. I was doing like chemical peels on my face as a kid because my acne was so bad.
Oh my God.
And I was a child actor. And so I didn't know what else to do. It was
Clearasil, like big.
I don't think they had it.
Clearasil all over. You didn't have Clearasil?
I don't.
It was like
definitely my parents never got it for me.
You like plop it on, and then it has like because it had like it sticks up like a little mountain, like a little thing. I don't know. It's like
I see kids with these stickers now.
That's new.
That's new.
Cool stuff.
Okay.
That's I still use those. That's it. Yeah. Oh, I love it. Well, my nephew's 13 and he's going through that, and I was like, oh my God. My nephew is going through puberty at the same time I'm undoing puberty, as a 54-year-old woman. And so it's very funny to see, like, he's trying to grow taller, he's trying to like get muscles. He's going to the gym at 6:00 every morning. I'm like, God, I remember all that stuff. Like, I just remember, I didn't go to the gym every morning, but I just remember like trying to be, because it's a hard time stuck between being a child and being an adult. And I think it's just very difficult. And I would assume now, I don't know, I'm not a doctor, but I would assume now with social media, because we flip through and we see people that are like 13, 15, 50, 65, 26, we do everything. We're comparing in every age group. I have to imagine that is really mind boggling for for somebody going through that, because I noticed that he's 13, but he's looking at a 26-year-old sometimes to compare, whatever, a video or whatever it is. And so I am aware of, we never had that, I never had that.
I want to take a moment to give a loud shout out to the Embody Lab, which is one of the most incredible resources for body-based and somatic therapies. This show is all about healing, and the Embody Lab does exactly that. Whether you're on your own journey of transformation and discovery, or enhancing your skill sets in your career as like a coach or a therapist, a body worker, or really any career where you are supporting other gently used humans, the Embody Lab is your place for deep, inspiring, and impactful workshops, certificates, masterclasses, and an incredible community of like-minded folks. I love the Embody Lab, and so do so many other people that call it a platform to come home to over and over again. The Embody Lab is giving my listeners an exclusive offer, a one-time 10% off code to enhance your embodied well-being. All you have to do is go to theembodylab.com and use the code GentlyUse10 at checkout. Yeah, the old research, and I'm talking about 10 years ago on puberty, was that there was, I mean, it's very binary, that boys who went through puberty early were popular. Like they felt a sense of confidence that created easier access to popularity.
Right.
Boys who went through puberty later showed greater signs of depression. This is where it gets funky. Don't write into me and try to cancel me. This is the research, not me. Girls who went through puberty earlier were more likely to be promiscuous. Whatever that means. I just know that that's the research. It's bias.
That's really interesting. Okay.
Yeah. Early.
Oh, is that
and
just because they
were more likely to do drugs and alcohol.
Well, I mean, that's just because
their bodies were different. So girls
were approached by people differently. They assumed that
they were approached more. Yeah.
I can see that.
Exactly. Yeah. And girls who went through puberty late had higher test scores.
Oh, they did? Was really, I'm trying to think. I think I
which
didn't
is
get
interesting.
Either one.
Yeah.
I think I when I go back and look, I don't think anyone approached me. I guess this. I look at some of those pictures. I'm like, so I didn't have that problem.
The hair protected you.
The hair protected me from for any promiscuity. I think it's just.
I knew we would circle back to hair as the main developmental milestone.
It's a thread.
So let's move into that other major milestone that actually is your major focus right now. So we talked about puberty, and now we're talking about, what would you call menopause? Like the antithesis of puberty? Like
I think
the unpuberty?
I don't know.
That's an interesting idea.
I know. It's my sister-in-law had to explain it to my nephew when he was 11. He said, Mom, it was a few years ago. What is this Aunt Tamsen talking about this menopause all the time on Instagram? Because he was just getting on Instagram to do his, videos of sports or whatever. And so she's like, oh God, how should we Tamsen come explain this? She goes, well, you know how your body's going to go through changes and you're going to go through puberty. And well, Aunt Tamsen is doing that in just a different way. And so then she explained menopause and what it was. And sometimes your mom and Aunt Tamsen are going to get hot and their body's going to change. There's going to be hormones. And so now his favorite thing, well, it was for a while, was every time his mother would get a hot flash, he'd be like, menopause is coming to town. So he liked to sing a song about menopause to traumatize her a little bit. But I guess that's what it is. I think it's the antithesis. No? I know, right? The things we don't, we want them to learn, and then we don't want them to
learn. I mean, it's definitely like when you started on this path talking about really talking about middle-age processes and menopause, is it that just like there wasn't many people talking about it? Like, I guess I feel like a little bit out of the awareness of like, oh, it's become so popular, especially because of you. Was it just not talked about?
No,
it
wasn't talked about. And a lot of people didn't want me to talk about it, which I found very interesting and scary at the same time, because, somebody's like, you shouldn't talk about that. That's going to ruin your career. I heard that. I heard, I was going into a meeting. I actually wrote about this. I was going to a meeting and somebody said, like, please don't bring up menopause in this meeting. It is not sexy and it's not going to do well for any of the part of this business. We did a documentary on menopause. We had doors shut in our face. Like, this is a small population. People don't want to talk about this as a niche group of people. So most people didn't want to talk about it. And I think it's because it's wrapped up in age. I think it's wrapped up in, just a lot of things culturally that we associate with it. We associate lack of relevance, invisibility. We associate kind of your best years are behind you. And I think that is that's the reason a lot of people feel uncomfortable with it. And it's been very hush hush for a long time. I thought it was just because I lost my mother when I was younger, and then I didn't have anyone to talk to about it at this age. But then I realized that that's not the case. People who have mothers, right there next to them had not learned about this. So it's been pretty fascinating. Out of all the stories I've told, that this is the one that never came up.
Yeah. In reflection, I had developmental psychology classes. There was I've had a lot of physiology classes.
Sure.
I don't really remember. I don't remember talking that much about menopause or being prepared to talk about it with clients or patients.
Yeah.
Wow.
Isn't that fascinating?
Yeah, it's one of those things again when it's so the normal, it's so the status quo that you don't realize or recognize until someone like you and a few of other amazing folks have really put it on the map. I mean, the map of cognitive awareness, I guess.
The map of awareness. I was surprised. So in a lot of the research, but in a lot of the research, we found doctors, even gynecologists that had like a week of training a month sometimes. We're talking about gynecologists. So, I mean, that's their area. So I did find that fascinating. And I guess I also found it fascinating as when I went back and looked, and the quintessential third block of the news, which is always like the featurey, like, ooh, what's going on in the world for water coolers? And you do all these, there's a new study out on coffee. 17 cups of coffee a day will change your metabolism, whatever it is. And you'd be like, oh gosh, okay.
It'll make you shit your brains out.
Yeah. Well, but then 3 months later, it'd be like, you shouldn't have any coffee, just matcha tea. The new study on 3 mice is that, those are always these studies. Years. And so we never did anything on menopause. We never did anything on perimenopause. Wow. We never did anything on menopause.
No.
Like never.
I remember the 6 months when wearing socks to bed was all the news rage. Like so many news stories were like, want to sleep better? They finally figured out if you wear socks to bed, you'll sleep.
Yes.
And meanwhile, millions of people are going through menopause and no one will talk about it. Wow.
No.
Shit.
It's unbelievable.
Shit.
It's unbelievable. And I was one of the ones reporting on it all the time. And so, I did the sock study. I've done all of them. Like I've been around since eggs were bad, eggs were good, eggs were bad, eggs were good. All of them, like they've come and gone and flip-flopped 100 different ways. And so, but when I realized this part, I couldn't stop talking about it. Like I couldn't stop myself if I tried talking about it because I just couldn't believe it. And the more I researched it, the more I was like, we have to do something. Like, what's going on here? But it really is the women that have done something, like they have said like, oh, this isn't okay. And so I think it's been remarkable to see. Like I've heard of like grassroots movements, obviously. I've never seen it like this. Like this has been like, we demand more money. We demand more attention, we demand more care, demand more education, need solutions. Like it is moved at a rate. And then I was like, maybe it's just my algorithm, but I don't think it is. I think that, men are talking to me. I was in Davos. We brought our film there last month, and at night there's like this cocktail party. Everyone comes together. And then the question is like, what brought you to Davos? And so I was like, what am I going to say? Like the first person asked me, I'm like, we're showing a film. I wasn't sure what to say, because I'd never been there before and I was highly intimidated, and everyone's like,
I mean, it's hard to be intimidated there.
I'm like, blah, blah, global, blah, 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 blah. I'm like, what? So finally one day I was like, menopause brought me here, like the second night. And the guy's like, really? And I go, yeah. He goes, what about menopause? And then I just like went into the spiel of it. And then I had him like captured for an hour talking about it. Then we went into like research and money and investment. And so I thought, wow, that's incredible. All these years, all these things that have gone on, and that's not been conversations anywhere. When it not just physically and emotionally and mentally impacts, it financially impacts the world because women are in this age group and how many of them.
Yeah. Is there anyone talking about men's menopause?
I love it. Men with understanding menopause or men's menopause?
Both, but we'll take one then the other.
Okay. So men in menopause, I just released this opt-in. It's just for free. It's like a downloadable called Menopause and Relationships. And it's a men's guide to menopause, because I got so many questions about it. I can't believe you just asked me that. Literally, they put the website up yesterday. Put the thing up yesterday. How crazy is that? Yeah, because two reasons. One, because men do go through something. And two, because we're with men in all areas of our lives, whether it's personal or family or career or all of the above. And they have to know what's going on, and they want to. It's not that they don't want to know. It's that we didn't know. So how would they know?
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
that's really the truth. So it's kind of fascinating what I've seen in terms of men wanting to be supportive. I was telling you about the documentary that we did. It's called The M Factor. And we had women's groups like all over the world bring it into their community, bring community together and talk about it. And then I got this email about 2 weeks ago from a men's group who brought it in, and they talked about it. I thought that was so cool.
I love that.
Isn't that cool? I thought that was just really neat. So I was like, oh, wow.
Yeah.
They didn't have to do anything. They asked for it. So
yeah. I mean, I just had this memory of when my mom was going through menopause, and my dad just pulled me aside and he was like, I don't know what's going on. And I just imagined him, had he had your documentary, having some maybe more empathy, maybe more understanding, more compassion, all the things we hope for from a human being.
I love that. Well, my dad, when I started talking about it, he was like, what? How long is this going to last? As if it was like a phase. I said, well, I just, it took a lot of research and we need money. We got to go to DC. And my father's like, well, because I was a journalist my whole life. I had no opinions, but I do. Even my father said, hey, do you think that after your mother's surgery, my mom had breast cancer, do you think that she was in menopause? And I go, yeah, I do. And he was like, do you think that's why she was hot all the time? And I said, I do. And so I realized she died 30 years ago, but it's like, I can't, the fact that we just kind of uncovered that in our minds is mind boggling to me. So that's just unbelievable. So I'm happy that the conversation is out there for sure. And there's a lot of work to do with it, obviously. I didn't think I'd be here though, talking about that.
What do you think we'd talk about? No, just kidding.
No, not here. I'm just saying.
No, I know. No,
puberty.
I know.
Well,
puberty.
I just had no idea that was going to be anything that ever,
Well, it's clear that the unspoken needed to be spoken, and you were speaking it, and that it magnetized and attracted so many people to suddenly feel validated and seen and understood in a society where that's often just shunned. It's another part of shunning our developmental process of
it is. And it's, and there's some cultures where it's because wisdom is something to look up to and age is something to look up to. It's not everywhere is like this, but here I think it's very tied into ageism and all of the fears that we have at these ages.
Yeah. What's a few things or some particular things you wish everyone knew about menopause?
That it doesn't last forever, that there are solutions, and being prepared earlier is better. And just knowing, being really armed with the information. Because I think if you go into your doctor and you're 40, I would love for a baseline to be 40 years old and say, look, I know this is going to happen in the next 10 years, most likely perimenopause or symptoms. What do I need to know now? Here's the 3 things that I'm already starting to see happen. I might be gaining weight, or I might be getting hot flash, or whatever it is. And what do I need to do? So I think if we get that early jump on it, we're powerful then, and we're not waiting for something to happen to us. And I think that's where we've got to be with all of it. I think we've got to be proactive versus reactive when it comes to this. And so I think I want everyone to have that information, because there should be no barrier to information. That should be the easiest thing for us to get. Yeah.
I love in your work that you also say this isn't the end.
Yes. It's so far from it.
And I think in your life, you more recently got married, you started a new career. In fact, you are an embodiment of this can be just another beginning.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
I think that's exciting. I think that we have to have some things like that to look forward to. I had no idea after I got divorced I'd ever get remarried, ever. And so the fact that that's happened now, I always want people to know that it's never too late, for those kind of things. It's just not too late unless you decide it is. And so I think that that's the reason I like all these stories of what people do that are outside the norm, or even if they're doing something normal and something extraordinary happens to them. I do love those kind of stories. The world is changing so quickly. I don't know that we would have ever met and been able to talk like this 10 years ago. I mean, it's fascinating to me what we're able to do and share. And so I think that should give people more hope of, what they can accomplish, because it's certainly not the end.
No. And as you talk about like hearing some stories that have really given other people hope, can you share some of those?
Oh, gosh, yeah.
I'm pulling your journalist parts back out.
My journalist part. Yeah, there's a couple of like different. I think kids have always impacted me in just kind of a cool way. I did some different stories about little entrepreneur kids, maybe 12, 13, 14 years old, and I was like, oh my gosh, like they're smart and they care, and they're going to be like the ones that change the world. And then I just go to the other end of people who are older. And, I've done one story after another of women that were tired of their career, decided like, this is not what I'm going to do anymore. I'm going to go in this direction, and have really changed lives. And I think that that's kind of been those are the stories that I gravitate toward. I gravitate toward the woman who, is a single mom and has started this business out of her basement or whatever it was, then all of a sudden is impacting women's lives. And I think that those are the ones that, I look at for hope and for acknowledgement, or people that have turned their health around, have, been given a diagnosis of something that was just terrible and not recoverable. And then all of a sudden have, made their own lifestyle changes and been able to change their path.
Yeah. I love hearing that too, because it's another version of this is not the end.
Yeah,
that
of course.
So often we feel stuck in
so
many aspects of our life, or stuck to our physiology and our biology of like, oh, it's coming up. Here's, as we're progressing through the milestones of life, here's just kind of where life ends, but we still have another 20, 30 years.
Yes. I mean, we have, and we want those to be good ones. Like the worst thing would be that you live to be 90 years old and you're unhealthy from 60 to 90. Like if that, obviously some things cannot be helped, but if we can do things kind of right now and realize we're not going to have this body forever, right? We're not going to have it like this. So if you're doing the best that you can. So I don't know. I've made that be kind of front and center to everything. And then mindset too, because I think mindset is so much. It's so much. I don't know. I think this has been a time for me to take care of a lot of those things that I ignored for a long time and thought were a luxury. I thought taking care of myself was a luxury. I thought sleep was a luxury. I thought, having the time to sit down and eat a nice meal and talk and have a conversation and not have to have the purpose of just getting the meal done was a luxury. And I don't look at them like luxuries anymore.
What's your new phrasing or word for it instead of luxury?
Oh, yeah. I mean, necessary. I think it's a necessity, but I think it's an enjoyment. Like I get to do this. I interviewed Sherry Shepherd about a year ago, and she was putting videos up like about how she loves to work out, and she works out in the morning. She gets up at 4:00 in the morning, gets to the, and I was like, oh my gosh, what? So early. So I said to her, like, how are you doing that? And, how do you make yourself, I don't remember how I phrased the question. She goes, well, I say to myself, I don't have to work out. I get to. And that stuck with me. And maybe I've heard it before, but she was the one that said it and it stuck with me. And I was like, oh, I get to have dinner with my husband tonight. Oh, I get to have my dad come visit. Oh, I get to have this problem that as much as it sucks, because if I didn't have this problem, I wouldn't have any of the other things in my life. And so I'm trying to look at it more. And I had a conversation with a friend about this. I said, you don't ever have any jealousy or envy. How is that possible? Like, that's just like, how are you not ever looking at somebody going, gosh, I want to have, they're so lucky. And she goes, I don't do that because I have to take their whole life with me. And if I don't want to take their whole life, I can't take one part of it. I'm like, oh, that's the answer.
Wow.
So, right?
That's deep. That's
that was a deep one. That was
I
good.
need that.
I didn't think about that.
So what are some of the, as we're moving through middle age, and particularly your audience is expanding, but it's primarily focused on empowering women through middle age, through menopause. We talked about some of the things you wish people just fundamentally knew. What are some of like the tools like we kind of are already in that territory of like, what are some of the tools, like shifting your mindset? I get to really looking at, this is not the end. This is just another opportunity to, yeah.
Yeah, there's so many of them now, I think. I think working out is one of them. I've forced myself to start saying that, even on the days I dread it. I get to.
I get to.
I get to. When I go and visit somebody, I used to be in this place where I'd be like, oh God, this is going to be, it's just like this weekend's going to be so long. And like, I said yes to this. Why did I say yes to this forever? That time. You're like, why did I say yes to this? And so I'm like, you know what? I get to do this, which is really nice. I say it about, time, I think more than anything else. I say it about sleep, which I never did before. And I say it about learning new things. Learning new things has been really huge and pivotal to me. And I don't know why. Maybe it's because most of the input that I used to have that was new was from a news story or something like that. Now I want new input. I want input of things I really, really care about. And so that's what I've been trying to say. Look, you get to do this. So if you think it's stressful, you get to do this. You're very lucky. I feel like I'm trying to be more appreciative of those things that I used to take for granted.
I think that's the beauty of getting to sit on a certain developmental milestone and be able to look back and also look forward.
Totally. Yeah. That didn't come, and I wake up and be like, you know what, Tamsen, you're so lucky. You're amazing. That's my husband. He's like, everything's great. It took me a long time. It took me a lot of therapy. It took me a lot of reading. It took me a lot of failing and a lot of wasted time of looking at somebody else and thinking like, why not me? And I don't want to be that person because it's a waste of time, and it never served me. It never gave me anything back. And so I feel good to kind of be able to to help people, guide them from that, even if it's like a breakup or whatever it is, because of, we've all done these things. As more time goes on, you just have more experience. And so I get excited to try to help with that in any way I can.
Yeah. I think the why me is such a big one that can kind of pull us down and take us out of like,
totally,
what am I supposed to get from this?
Yeah, totally.
And how do I build something better for myself? Like whether it's more, whether it's in a relationship, like actually, how do I get to build a better relationship that's more respectful to me? How do I get to show up at my job in a way that I feel more empowered?
Sometimes the world's moving so fast right now. And I feel like we miss these things, right? Because we're so worried about getting to the next text and getting to the next, and I'm totally guilty of it. But yeah, I do try to take those moments. So I do feel powerful when I show up and focused and not, distracted. So I don't know anything that's going on.
Yeah. I love that. I know we have a few minutes left and I just want to come back to menopause. I know you talk about it a lot. You get to talk about it a lot.
I get to talk about it a lot. I get to. Good.
I appreciate if we were to kind of go through, and this is an interesting exercise of like, there's kind of major, age groups, like girls who are going through puberty, 20-year-olds, 30-year-olds, 40-year-olds. And we kind of did this before, but I want to just like bring it a little bit more. If we were kind of go through some major age groups and just say, what would you say from the wisdom you have now and the wisdom you've been sharing in the world? Because it might be different to a 16-year-old versus a 25-year-old versus like, so if we just to share that because we have a wide range of listeners, different ages.
No, I love that. What age should we start with?
Let's go with puberty.
Oh gosh. Okay, good. Cause I give my nephew advice. So I always say this to him. I'm like, anybody that is not being nice to you, because that's, kind of this time, anyone that's not being kind to you or is making fun of you, because that's the thing kids do now, I want you to just think about in like 2 years, you might not even know this person. You might not even know them. And they might actually wind up being your best friend. So you don't know what anyone's going through at home. Like I've said this to him over and over again. I was like, so just be nice to everybody and don't worry. And I know it hurts your feelings sometimes, but just it's okay. Like you don't know things are going to change. Cause I think that's the biggest thing I learned, right? Like anything that's a problem today probably won't be a problem tomorrow. Definitely won't be a problem in a week, but it's hard to explain that to somebody. And somebody young. So, and I always say to him, like, this is the most fun time. You get to have fun, and you have to tell your Aunt Tamsen anything. So we have like codes between us, and we have like little, so I think that those are really important. So a kid feels like there's, he has his parents, but then he also has somebody outside of them. So I've always wanted him to have something else in case there's ever a problem. Anything that he felt like he couldn't say to my brother and my sister-in-law, he always has me. So I created that with him starting very young. So we have this connection. Yeah. So I love that.
I love that. And I really want to point out like this, what you said about like time, because especially at like that age, especially when we're in the flux of all of those hormones in that way, in that incarnation, it doesn't feel like, and we don't have a lot of perspective of time. Yeah. Like that in time, things change. So I love that advice for someone around that age.
Okay. What's our next
Should we go to like mid-late 20s to early 30s? That kind of like.
All of the pressure of have to get married. I'm not, ahead enough in my career. I'm not making enough money yet. All my friends are doing this, but I'm not. Because I've heard, I've known a number of people that are in their like 30, 33, are in that stress of all that stuff. And I want to say like, it will happen when it's supposed to happen, and pushing and fretting and fearing that of not meeting. There's a couple of the stages in that age group, right? Not meeting somebody yet, being with somebody and maybe not being sure about them, or they're not sure about you. Not sure whether to have children, or sure and not doing it yet because you haven't met somebody or whatever it is, or you can't. And then career, like those are kind of those 4 buckets, I think, during that time that I've noticed. And I guess I just hope that they see a longer line. I mean, biologically, I understand that, but a longer line, a longer runway in front of them, and more options. There's more options than I had when it came to having children, more options than I had when it came to career choices and whether you can move in and out of a career. So I hope that they see options. And I think that options make you breathe a little bit, and knowing those options are possible.
Yeah. Yeah. That restoration of agency.
Yes. Yes.
I love that. Yeah. And I might just even add to it. I'm like, especially for those in like your late 20s who are like, where am I? Whatever. I'm like, just a reminder, your prefrontal cortex is just finished developing. Like you have so much more time to be like, I mean, you're supposed to be in some type of crisis by around that time, because your prefrontal cortex is, and suddenly you have more meta perspective and you're like, what the fuck? Yeah. So just to normalize
I know.
Yeah.
It's so true. It's so true.
Oh my gosh. All right. So let's go to 40s, and then we'll head up the ladder from there.
Yeah. 40s, I would say a lot of that is career and assessment, right, of the relationship. And I would say if you've assessed a relationship and you really feel like that's not where you want to be, that, I wouldn't drag that out forever. I would say like, it's okay. Some people get married when they're in their 20s, and they've changed now quite a bit. I would also say that to start paying attention to the health aspects of things, because that's where you're going to be in that perimenopause phase, starting with weird symptoms that you can't believe could be happening because you're too young for it. But I would pay attention to that, and I would start putting myself, start putting myself more ahead of the other people that I was always making time for everybody else. And then I would figure my stuff out later. I would reverse those things. And then I would say, if you're not feeling, like a lot of people love their job, and I would hope that they feel like that if they want to stay there, it's great. And if they decide they don't want to stay there, they know that that's an option to move out of. And then I would start paying more attention to my parents at that point, because I think that that's a time we start to see our parents age and our kids grow up. And I would put a lot more time into family.
These are great, by the way. This is your next book after the one that comes, that's about to come out. And it's really nice to just hear like the developmental. I mean, I know it from like a social science perspective, which is drab and boring and not actually, it's like, here's the data.
It's good. It's good.
But I don't think I've gotten to hear, this is like, as I'm listening and I'm like, oh, this is helpful. This is just nice to just hear someone with lived experience and who's interviewed thousands and thousands of people give us kind of a perspective on like the sort of like, here's the advice for these sort of common decades. All right. So do we group 50s and 60s? Is that rude?
I don't know. No, it's not rude. 50s, I feel like right before that, not fearing 50. And I think the perception of it has changed a bit. I can't tell, but I think it has. I mean, it has in my mind. I don't think of 50 as old. I don't cringe when I say my age anymore. I don't go like, I'm 54. I'm 54. So that's kind of cool. That's different, right? I think that really assessing where you are now, I think there's some gifts that come on the other side if you've gone through menopause and that transition, and now those milestones of marriage and children and all, the pressures of some of that are behind you. I mean, for me, it's been all about what I want to do next. It's all about like living my someday today. That's what I call it. So I'm not like, oh, someday I'm going to do that. I'm going to get to that, but I got to get through this first. This is my someday. And so I think of it like that. And I think like, what do I want the next 30 years to look like? What do I want? I mean, that's how I think of my runway now, which is intimidating, scary, and exciting. So I almost think I got to restart, I'm like, wow, it started over again. So I do think about that. I do think about health. I think about my husband's health. I think about my brother, my sister-in-law, my nephew. I do think about that more than anything else. So that's what I think the 50s are for, and probably 60s too. Yeah. I would think of both of those. I think those kind of can group together. And then 70s, 80s, 90s, I don't know what my advice is yet for those. But I will say this. If I used off my dad's bonsai trees, if I used off my dad's advice, go to a pottery class at 85 years old and bonsai trees. Because he doesn't sit. He's like, goes. He works out 3 times a week. It's like, it's amazing. But I think you have to be surrounded by some people that you love, whether it's family, friends, created family. And I also think it's being curious there. I think that's what he does. And that's what I've watched. I just started pottery classes. So I'm going to meet up with your dad and we're going to go do pottery together. Yeah. That's so cool. He's all excited. He bought his apron and his tools. And I was like, do you have anything you can send to me that you made? And he goes, oh, it looks like crap right now. I go, you're an architect. How could it look like crap? Like, don't you know how to do this? So I always give him a hard time. And he loves to laugh. So that's good. I love that. Yeah. Usually like the very first time you get kind of lucky. And then after that, you're like, whoa. I know. He's like, I don't even have a bowl that's not wobbly. I was like, really? It takes a while. Yeah. My vase looks like a ashtray. Yeah. My last couple of vases. That's okay. It's a process. I want to see them. I'll text them to you. I need a picture. Oh, my love. This has been such a delight. It's such a pleasure. Thank you. It. I love it too. Where can people devour your wisdom more in the world? Instagram, Tamsen Fadal. The book is How to Menopause. Maybe the next one's How to Life. I don't know, but it's how I love that. Shit, we're going to sell that tomorrow. And then, anywhere on social media at Tamsen Fadal. And we just have a good time. We have a good time. And we'll put all of your contacts in the show notes, of course. And thank you so much. Oh, you are. Yeah. I love your new book title, by the way. Don't anyone take it. Tamsen owns that. Trademarked. Trademarking that thing. Thank you so much. And to all our gently used humans out there, we love you. Thank you for listening to the Gently Used Human podcast with Dr. Scott Lyons and friends. Visit gentlyused.com for fun extras. And don't forget to spill the tea and gossip about the show with all your friends and frenemies. And show some love by giving us 5 stars and leaving a review in your favorite apps. This helps us connect with all the other gently used humans out there. Oh, and by the way, you look fierce today.